Welcome to Khetz, and in this video I'll be doing another example to show how you can draw your own Venn diagram given problem statement. So this is a problem that you're given. I'll just read it out and go through the steps of how you can construct a Venn diagram. So the problem says there are 200 learners and there are a bunch of statements after that. So let's start. There are 107 learners that take art, 90 learners that take dance, 63 learners take graphic design, 35 learners take dance and art, 23 learners take art and graphic design. And okay, before I continue with the rest, I just want to highlight the importance of and or. Previously, we just talked about the notation of each of these, right? And now, since we're talking about a graphical representation of the information, which is the Venn diagram, it's important that you understand that when you have an and, you basically have an intersection. Just like the meaning of that thing, it's called an intersection. So one circle basically represents a class. We can call it A or anything else. And another class is B. When we say and, we are talking about this portion which overlaps, or this portion where we have the intersection of A and B. But when we talk about or, we basically include both of them. So if we want to find ourselves in either A or B, then we're talking about everything here inside. So if you want to put, let's say you wanted to land, you're trying to throw something and it has to land in A or B, then it has to land in here, which is the sum of everything which you see inside here. But when you talk about the portion A and B, it's only this section where you have the intersection, right? So that is just something which I wanted to clear up before moving on to the exact problem. So now let me just read the last three statements that I have, and last four actually, I think. I don't remember where it was, but let me just continue from here. 15 learners take art and dance and graphic design. So we do expect to have some sort of intersection of all of them, because we're told that there's a section, or there are at least 15 or exactly 15 learners that take art, dance and graphic design. So expect to have an intersection of three circles somewhere there, and that is the intersection point of all three. So we expect that, and we're just going to draw a proper diagram, not rough sketches like these ones, and we'll do that later after understanding what we have to do in full. So now the next line says 190 learners take art or dance or graphic design, and once again here's the term or and not and in this case. Now we established that we do have an intersection of all three, and that point there is the and. But now they're basically saying 190 learners take art or dance or graphic design, which basically means we're talking about everything, all the classes, which is everything which is inside here. If you want to fall in any of these, then we're talking about all of them, the sum of all the numbers that you can find in this region, which consists of everything. So once again, and intersection or everything that is involved. In this case, we're talking about art or dance or graphic design, and that would cover everything, right? So expect to have a total of 190 when we add everything which is in this portion. But remember, we're told that we have 200 learners. So in the sample space, which is indicated by a box, we expect to have 200 in total. If we have 190 here, then you know that on the outside we have 10, right? 190 added to 10 is 200, because everything in here has to add up to 200. That is what we expect, or that is what we want. So now the first question says, before we move on to the first question, we have a last statement which says X learners take graphic design and dance but not art. So let's say this is graphic design, let's say this is dance, let's say this is art over there. So it says some students take what is it, graphic design and dance, so G and D, but not A, which means you're talking about, it's an and, so you're talking about an intersection, but the intersection has to only consist of graphic design and dance, but it should exclude A. So previously we did talk about the intersection of all three, so it can't be that portion. But even if you only have this information, you should be able to tell that we're talking about the intersection of G and D only, and that intersection should not include art. So that is what that means. And now I guess I can now move on to the questions. And the first question 1.1 says, draw a Venn diagram to represent the given information. And you're going to have the symbol or the letter D to indicate this. You're going to have A to represent art. You're going to have G to represent graphic design. So let's draw proper circles and let's have a decent diagram, shall we? So I'm just going to take this there, then have 3 circles. That is not what I wanted. So let me delete this. I'm actually looking for this. Okay. Let's enlarge this, and in here we're going to have 3 circles. So let's enlarge the circle as well. Let's take this circle, if I can click it, and I want to enlarge that as well. And can I click the circle inside here? I don't think so. So let me rather first deal with the circles. So we're going to have 3 circles. Let's take one of them there, the other down here. Then I'm just going to select everything. Okay, it should only include the circles, and I want to have an intersection of all of them, then an intersection of some of them, and that should be fine. Now let's scroll up a bit, then take this and move it here. Okay, now that I have this, I'm just going to move this rectangular thing over there, and that should do. I think that should do. So this is our diagram. We're told that dance is denoted as D, and A for art, and G for graphic design. So let's have it in this way, right? You can have it in any order, doesn't really matter. And the first thing that you want to do is to write the value of the intersection of all your classes. So we have 3 classes, dance, art, and graphic design. And you want to pick this one that includes all of them, which is the intersection of all of them first, because it affects everything else. And here's why, or here's how. So the intersection of all 3 is this portion over there, and that is where you expect to write your 15. So let's write the 15 over there, and it's given to us 15 learners take art and dance and graphic design. So that is where it should fall. And now we can look at the other statements, and so you start with all of them, so the intersection of all of them. Then you can move on to the intersection of the others. So once you have the intersection of all of them down, you can now look at other intersections. And this is where you would see the importance of actually starting with the intersection of all of them, because the intersection of, let's say, 2 also includes the intersection of all of them. So for example, this line says 35 learners take dance and art. It also includes the learners which take dance, art, and graphic design, because within this class that is there. So that is why you have to start with the one which has the intersection of all 3, because now if you want to compute this, or if you want to talk about this section, It's this section over here, which is the intersection of dance and art, which includes the intersection of all three. So now to have the proper value or the correct value here, you have to say you have 35 at the intersection of D and A, but you currently have 15 over there. So what is the value which we have to input over there so that the sum of these two should be 35? And you can find that equals to 20. So you have to input 20 in here so that the sum is indeed 35, so that the sum of D and A is 35. Moving on, so we've done this one. Moving on to the next one, it says art and graphic design, you have 23 over there. And we have to do the same thing. We just have to look at where we have art and let's see where we have art and graphic design. So art is over here, graphic design is over here. So this portion where we have the intersection of art and graphic design also includes the intersection of all three, and it has to add up to 23. So we can find the other value which remains over there by just saying we expect our total to be 23. We currently have 15. So what should we put there? And the answer is 8. So we have 8 over there, and we've now filled most of the intersections. We only have this intersection left over there, and that is covered over here, the last statement. It says X learners take graphic design and dance. So graphic design and dance, which should be this portion over here, but we have to exclude art, but not art. If you check the last statement, it says but not art. So usually, just like we did in the previous two, we'd include this whole portion, but now art is excluded. So that portion, which is the intersection of all three, has to be excluded. We'll only focus on the point where we have the intersection of graphic design and dance, which is that point. So now we're told that at this point we have X, so which means that is unknown. So at a later stage or at some point we have to find that so that we have the full Venn diagram. So now let's see what other information do we have. So we've filled that into our Venn diagram, and we've filled this into our Venn diagram. And next, we've also filled this. We did this one first. And what can we do next? Now, if you check up here, we're told that 107 learners take art. So the art circle has to add up to 107. And that actually will give you the value over there, because we already have most of the values. So we have 20, we have 15, and we have 8, and some other value, question mark over there. And the sum of everything in the A circle has to add up to the given total of 107. So that should be 107 in total. So to find this question mark over there, you just have to subtract everything that you currently have from 107, and the value that you do get is 64. So the answer here should be 64, or the value that you input over there should be 64. Right? So we've now completed the A circle, but if you look at the others, there's a missing value there, and an X that we have to find. So how can we denote all of that which is happening, or how can we actually fill in our Venn diagram? So if you look here, we're told that 63 learners take graphic design, which means the sum of everything in the G circle has to add up to 63. And once again, you just have to subtract everything else from the total. So you're going to subtract X, 15, and 8 from the total of 63, and you can add these two. That should be basically 23. And if you subtract that from this 63, it should be 40. So this is the result that you have over there, and that is the value that I expect to have over there. Now, since we don't know X, so we just write it as it is, 40 subtract X. And we're going to do the same thing for D, which is for dance, and let's see how many we have in total. So we have 90 learners in total that take that over there, and the sum has to be 90 once again, which means we subtract everything that we currently have from 90, which is the total. So everything which falls in this circle has to add up to 19. So now we have 15, we also have x, and this should be 35, and subtracting that from 90 should be 55, and the x will be negative because of the negative sign over there. And that is the value that we're going to put in there, so 55 minus x. And one final thing that I can talk about is that we have this line. And I did mention when we started the video what it exactly means to have this kind of statement. So we're talking about all. So they're saying 190 learners take art or dance or graphic design, which means we're talking about any of these three circles. And the total of everything which falls in here is 190. But we know that we have a total of 200 learners. So we do expect to have 10 on the outside, which is all the way out here. So 10 learners don't fall in any of these classes, dance, art, or graphic design. So we basically put them on their own on the outside, right? So that is how you denote that, because the sum of this portion is 190. So we've dealt with all the statements that were given. So all the statements are usually helpful, or they're always helpful, and this is how you'd fill up your Venn diagram. So you should expect to get your full marks for having all of this: the box for the sample space, the circles for each of the classes, and all the values filled in according to your calculations. Now moving on, so we've done 1.1, we can now move on to 1.2. It says how many learners, and please note that it says how many, not the probability. So it's not asking for the probability. The probability, if they were asking for the probability, they'd basically ask explicitly, just like in the last question where they asked for the probability. Now they only asked for the number, so how many. So all that we've been putting into our Venn diagrams are actual numbers. So that would be your answer. Any number that you extract from here, or any sum that you add up, should be your answer without dividing by anything. So it says how many learners have not registered for any of art or dance or graphic design. And the answer to that, if you remember from the previous video, which I'll just link on the top right, when I talked about this formula which I use in my head. So the sum of a territory divided by the total of the sample space. Right? If you remember this thing, now we have to look at the territory that we're talking about. So where are we talking? This is when we're dealing with probability. Now, since we're not dealing with probabilities, we can just take the top number and give it as our answer. But once again, we're looking at a particular point, a particular section. So let's see, how many learners have not registered for any of art or dance or graphic design? So the portion which forms part of the section dance, art, or graphic design is this portion. So we want to exclude this section because we're looking at the number of learners which have not registered. So everything which is outside this red portion is the answer, and therefore the answer to that should be 10. So the answer to 1.2 is 10. So 10 learners. And 1.3 says how many, there should be a Y over there, it says how many learners, that should be have registered for graphic design and dance but not art. So now we have and over there, so we're looking for an intersection of G and D. So the intersection of G and D is over there, but there is an exclusion of art. So anything that has to do with art should be excluded from this intersection. So the total intersection of D and G is over there, but we now are told that we have to exclude that portion which includes art. So we're only talking about this portion which consists of X. So in another way, or phrased differently, this question is asking for X. So now the question is, how do we find that X? And all that you have to do is to sum everything up and it has to add up to 200. So everything in the sample space has to add up to 200. And you can either focus on the 3 and sum them up to 190, or you can focus on everything in the sample space, and the sum of that should be 200, right? So adding everything up, we already know that the A circle should add up to 107 from the question itself, because we're told that 107 learners take art, and we have all the numbers that are involved in that 107. So just writing 107 should be enough to show this part. Then we just add everything else that we have. Then going to add x, then going to add 40 subtract x, and let's see if we have everything. We don't. We left this out, and that should add up to 200, which is the sum. And doing some math, you should get, so the minus x and the x cancel out, taking this x to the right hand side and the 200 to the left hand side should give x equals to negative 200, and the sum of that should be 162, and then add it to 50, and that should give you 212. And so x should be 12. So that is the answer. And this, just write 12 learners. So the question was, how many learners are registered for graphic design and dance but not art? So we have to exclude that art portion and only focus on D and G. And that is the x, and that is how you find the x. You basically add everything up and make sure it adds up to the total number of learners, or you can only focus on this section, which is D or G or A, and the sum of that should be 190 as given in the question. Either way, you should get the correct answer by doing that. And now that we have that, we are basically done with 1.2 as well, and we are also done with 1.3. We're now left with the last question, the very last question, and we're now talking about probability. So in the previous questions, we've just been talking about the number of learners, and in the last question, we are talking about probability, which means we have to use this formula as it is, the sum of the territory divided by the total of the sample space. So now let's see how we can get to that, or let's actually do that. So what is the question asking for? The question is asking for the probability that a learner selected at random is registered for at least 2 of the following: art, dance, or graphic design. And we also give our answer in 3 decimal places. So a decimal and rounded off to 3 decimal places. So let's look at the territory that we're talking about. So at least 2. So that means 2 or more. So the student or the learner has to be registered for 2 or more of these, which basically means we are talking about the intersection of 2 or more. So what is that section, or what is that territory that we're talking about? If you come to your Venn diagram, we now know that the x is 12, and the intersection of at least 2 would be this portion, this whole portion on this territory over there that we have, right? And in that section, we have here, we have the intersection of 2, D and A. Here, we have the intersection of D, A, and G. And here, we have the intersection of D and G. Over there, we have the intersection of A and G. So the condition is that we have to have an intersection of 2 or more. So even if it's more than just 2 intersections, that part is also a part of our computation. So we have to add everything which is in this section, which is the intersection of 2 or more of these classes. So then the answer would be the sum of everything in that portion, and the x once again is 12. Then we're going to divide by the sum of everything, because we're now computing the probability. And if you just combine this, that should be 23, that over there should be 32, added to that should be 55. So 55 over 200. And if you convert that to the form that is wanted in the question, then you should get 0.275. And that is your answer. So with Venn diagrams, that is the process that you'd follow to construct your own Venn diagram. So you basically start with the intersection of all three, then you move to the intersection of two, then move on to whatever is left in the Venn diagram. And make sure that everything inside your sample space basically adds up to the given total. In this case, we had 200 as our total. And once again, I do hope that this was of value. I hope you learned something in the video, and this will actually be helpful to you. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. If you want to book a session, a private session on Microsoft Teams, just email me. If you have any comments, if you want me to explain something to you, just let me know. And that is it in this video, and I will see you in the next video.